Ari, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
I saw you, for those of you who don't know, Ari posted on Facebook. I've been following you for a while. Love what you do. And you're like, I want to get on more podcasts. I'm like, let's make it happen. And as we, obviously, I kind of knew from the name that you're a tribesman, you're part of the tribe. And then you confirmed. So that's awesome. So welcome, brother.
Thank you.
Um, have you on the show, author, speaker. One of the best things I think that you work on that I've seen the client list is ridiculous, by the way, is on productivity. You know, Joe Polish, I follow George Bryan, Damon John, Tony Robbins, Dean Jackson, Jay. I mean, the names go on and on. Tell me, first of all, how you got into the space of productivity and building a business in coaching to help founders replace themselves and do less but make more.
So, kind of a weird route, I'd say, actually. I got really sick, basically, is what happened. When I was 23 years old, I had just come off 3 years of building this really major real estate development project in upstate New York. And I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease,
Mm.
which is a chronic inflammatory condition that affects the digestive tract. And it's very painful, very debilitating, and considered to be incurable. And the most immediate effects was I basically went from working these like 18-hour days on a construction site to barely being able to do an hour of work in a given day. And after a couple of years of biohacking and experimenting, I was able to start to turn things around and ultimately got off the meds and have no clinical signs of Crohn's disease at this
Nice.
point in my body, which is supposed to be impossible. But a big part of that was dealing with that 1 hour restriction. And that actually really, that one question of what would you do if you only had an hour a day to work is really the genesis of everything that's come since then. Because that idea of this extreme restriction on your time and your ability to get things done means that you have to start making decisions about the things that you're not going to do. And if the things that you're not going to do still have to get done, then you have to figure out who, or more and more frequently, what is going to do them for you. So it really built out of there, so that I started experimenting with different productivity methods and creating some of my own, writing about it, and then teaching about it. And eventually, I someone came up to me after a class and asked if I would do coaching. Started coaching, got kind of thrown into that. The book came out, and then I got asked to speak on a couple of really big stages, and have been very fortunate that I've been able to work with some really, really major entrepreneurs and companies all around the world. And that has continued to develop into what was originally a personal productivity method into more of a business focused methodology, which I
Mm.
call the Replaceable Founder. And at this point, I'd say I make entrepreneurs more replaceable by helping them create systems, processes, leadership systems, legacies. And my focus mainly now is on coaching. So I work with individuals all around the world, all different size businesses and different industries to help them become more replaceable and also help the people within their organizations become more replaceable.
Now, as we talk about replaceable, is the focus more on people, like delegation? Is it on technology? Is it a mix of everything when you talk about
It,
replaceable?
it's a total mix. The framework that I always teach is optimize, then automate, then outsource.
Hmm.
So outsourcing is the last step. It's a very important one, but that reverses it for a lot of people. A lot of people want to just outsource things right away. It's like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's too hard. I need somebody. I need more people. And that just makes the problem worse in most cases. So we want to automate before we try to get a human involved. And of course, nowadays we can automate things that, a week ago you had to hire a full-time person for. It's kind of incredible. That still means this is a very important place for delegation outsourcing, but it's a different place than I think a lot of people approach it as.
Yeah. Let's talk about the three real quick. Optimize. What does that mean to you, and how does a founder or somebody in business optimize? What does that mean? Because we talk, high optimization, and that word gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
So one of the ways to look at that is that idea of the restrictions, right? So a lot of times when people say that they don't have enough time, or they don't have enough money, or some finite resource that they don't think they have enough of, more often than not, it's actually the opposite, in my opinion, that they actually have too much of that thing, too much time, too much money, and they're not using it the right way. And restriction breeds innovation, right? So if we look at optimization, we look at a process that we're going through. First of all, many people have processes that operate in their businesses that are happening on a regular basis, daily or even hourly, whatever it might be, and they don't really have a good sense of what that process actually looks like, right?
Mm,
So we all have shortcuts, we all have things that we do, we get in the habit of doing things. But then if you try to teach that to somebody else, you're going to try to teach them your shortcuts and you're going to miss pieces and it just never quite works out that well. So actually looking at the way we do things is the first part of optimization. Like, why does that process that takes 3 steps, why couldn't we do it in one? Or once we get to one, why can't we eliminate it entirely? More often than not, what you see is somebody who thinks like, oh, this is just a 6-step process, but it actually is 20. And they just kind of brush through things. So that's the first part of the optimization is a lot of subtraction rather than addition,
mm.
right? Looking at what we can take away or conversely, what we can do with the existing resources and how we can do more with that. Those are the optimizations, right? So being as efficient as possible with the resources that we have.
Love it. And then let's jump onto automation. That seems very like techie with AI today, automating different systems. Are we implementing those things and combining the optimization with the automation so that things just run smoother?
Yeah, so we want to optimize first, right? And then within that optimization, you're inevitably going to find things that should and well can and should be automated. And those are the things that have on at a basic level, those are things that have any sort of repetitive nature to it, right? So anytime you hear yourself using the word every, right? So every time I do a podcast interview, every time I book a new meeting, every time I sign up a new client, the word every is a trigger. It should be a trigger where you're like, all right, this is something I'm doing over and over. How do I systematize that, right? How do I automate that so that not just so that it's easier, maybe cheaper, maybe runs 24/7, sure, but what we're also doing with automation is we're reducing errors,
Mm,
right? So the things where it's like, oh, I got really busy, so I just stopped doing that part of the process. Like we want to eliminate those things. So you need to optimize first so you even know what you should be automating. And then automation could be simple triggers and actions like, Zapier, IFTTT, make, all those things where it's like, this thing happens here, do this thing here. Or it can be things like automation, although, I mean, AI, although I would put AI almost now a little bit more in the category of outsourcing and delegating.
mm. Love it. And then, of course, outsourcing. You talked about how outsourcing is different today than what people are used to. What does that mean?
So there's still a generation of people that are used to the secretary sitting outside their office at the desk that they can just go drop something on their table and walk away, right? Like,
Yeah.
and there was a place for that, but it's a significant crutch, and in a lot of ways, it's a significant liability because that person becomes a pinch point if they leave or get sick or don't want to be there that day, whatever it might be. So, and even in those scenarios, a lot of people never really learned how to properly delegate because delegation is not just about this is something I don't want to deal with, so somebody else can deal with it, and that's just being annoying. Delegation really should be about empowering someone, right? Because ultimately, you can't outsource or you can't automate, at least right now, taste, right?
Mm,
So if you need somebody's sort of particular flavor on something and they know this way and that, like, there's an element to that that is important, but sort of everything else around that, you shouldn't be giving them just stuff to do.
yeah.
So because of that, that creates an interesting learning opportunity for all of us as founders and entrepreneurs and people in terms of how we communicate what success looks like, right? Communicate what the resources are needed to complete this process are, and also what the steps are and everything, what the parameters, like when to come back to me if you have a problem, like all of those things go into proper delegation. And we can do that with in some cases now AI. We can do that with a generalist like a virtual assistant, and we can do that with specialists like a coder or a graphic designer. And they all require sort of different nuances in how we communicate what we want and what we need to get done.
Yeah. I think there's a difference, right? There's delegation versus abdication. And a lot of people get those two mixed up, and they're just like, I'm delegating, but nobody's doing, but they're actually abdicating. They're not inspiring or really teaching that taste that you're talking about. I want to dive deeper into identity. When somebody has less to do, I feel like people identify as busy, identify as stressful. And if you take that off the table with the guys or the people you've worked with, what happens when they're all of a sudden left with time and their identity is now confused. What happens then?
So it's a very risky place for me to be with clients, and something that it's risky, but I do it all the time. But it's a really big ego blow for a lot of people, and an ego blow in terms of not even like a reaction. It's more like they'll hold on to things so tightly because
Mm,
it's so much of who they are. When somebody's like, nobody can do this the way I can, it's ridiculous, right? Because I would argue that mastery comes through teaching, right? And if you're able to effectively communicate something that you think is a very high level, very nuanced, very important process to somebody else, then you truly have mastered it, right? Like in being able to let it go, that means you're a master of it. But if you can't convey that to somebody else, then you're probably not doing as great a job at it as you think. And there is almost definitely somebody else who could do it better. And that is like a gut punch for some people because they're so wrapped up in what they do as a means of validating who they are. And if we switch that to be like, look, there's two kinds of freedom. It's called the liberty paradox, a psychological concept. So there's a positive liberty and negative liberty. So the negative liberty is freedom from, right? So that's where I need the freedom from being stuck in the office because everybody needs me and I'm the only decision maker, right? Or the freedom from the 9 to 5, the freedom from the debt. There's freedom from. What they don't think about is a different thing, which is freedom to, right? So we want to have that positive liberty. And in my case, and with the people that I work with, it's the freedom to leave the business if you so choose to. And I don't want that necessarily, but I want you to be able to. Because if you can leave the business and in doing so, the business continues to grow and thrive in your absence. And what you get to do now is go out and experience other things with other businesses, other people, other cultures, whatever it might be. And now you can, if you choose, bring those contributions back into the business. What happens is that your only effect on the business is as an accelerant.
mm,
Whereas for most leaders of businesses, most, they are brakes.
yeah. For people hearing this, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this, the Jewish men who've prided themselves in being successful and busy and all those types of things. I want to talk about the breaks. People call it like the bottleneck, like you're the bottleneck sometimes, the breaks. When you're coaching somebody, how do you get through to them that they're the issue, they're the breaks? And when they see that, what occurs?
So, uh, it depends. It really depends on the scenario. I think there's a lot of people that they know deep down that they are the problem, and they either don't know how to do it, how to get out of there, which that's something easy to fix, or they just can't imagine what they would do
Mm,
otherwise. And they've never experienced that, right? They haven't had that space in some ways because they've just been so busy. It's for some people it's very freeing, right? Because now they can see these opportunities that they can get involved in. And those are really great conversations. And then there's the other ones where it's like it's almost like it just becomes boring at that point, right? Because they now have to sort of sit and be with themselves, right? You can get into a very sort of philosophical thing about that, and there is definitely, I'm sure, something relevant that's Talmudic about that, right? But like,
They can go study more.
yeah, right. There's more time to study Talmud, right? Like, it's but that's the thing, is right. Like, there's a great I guess it's Confucius or whatever, or Buddhist maybe, but it's like before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, right? So like I think part of the problem with a lot of the ways that some of these founders and some of these leaders see things is that they're trying to get to some echelon, but then what, right? But then there's the next echelon, and it sounds very corny, but then you kind of end up missing out on the journey, right? So productivity, my whole world, is a journey that has no end, right? We can always be more productive, more effective. We always can do that. But it's more about like why are we doing that? And that can change through different seasons of your life. I have 5 children right now, 5 young
Wow,
children,
amazing.
and I am involved in several different nonprofit groups in town here. I'm the vice president of our local rescue squad. I'm a volunteer EMT. Like there's all these other things that have enriched my life and made me a better person, right? Not just a better business person. And what that means right now, right, is that for a while now, like I haven't been growing my business, as a goal, and that's been fine, right? Because the business is there to sort of support my intellectual and spiritual growth as a person.
Dude, 5 kids. First of all, kudos to you. I've got three, and it's not an easy journey. Let's talk about productivity or less doing with such a big family. Do you incorporate optimizing automation in family? And I'd love to hear some tips on that to make it better. I'm sure the guys would as well.
Well, right. So, I mean, there's the concept of with Shalom Bayit, right? Peace in a
Yeah,
home,
Shalom Bait.
right? And then, of course, there's Tikkun Olam, which is relevant right now, actually, or we just had that, I guess, a couple weeks ago, repairing the world, for those who don't know, right? So, to me, like those, and I think about that a lot, right? That those are sort of constant guiding in a way, like, am I doing something that's going to create peace in our home, in our world? Am I doing something that's making our world or the world better? So yeah, yes, it does have a very significant place in what we do. I don't know how we would do it otherwise. Everything is uh, first of all, I have a Google Calendar with 27 calendars in it. That is our like, central source of truth. And I don't know how we would get anything done if we didn't have that and didn't rely on that heavily. Um, for a long, long time, I've used virtual assistants and things for all sorts of stuff. I haven't used a virtual assistant in almost 2 years now, mostly because of AI. But for the majority of the time that I've used virtual assistants, I've used them more in my personal life than I have in my business life, right? Because registering 5 kids for camp could take you a whole day, right? So, and the interesting thing about that for me, right, is that like there are always people who would react and be like, ah, how can you like outsource something like that? Like because that means that that time that would be done for that, I'm not putting that into the business. I'm putting that into the time with family and at home, right? And it doesn't show love to my kids if I fill out the camp form,
Mm.
right? Or my wife does, right? So it's all of these things that get in the way of the human element, essentially, that you can get rid of by optimizing automating outsource. And then something very, very simple, which I wrote about in my very first book, is Amazon Subscribe and Save is one of the greatest things ever because you can get on this sort of schedule of things that you might need in the house. And one of the ones that I talk about in the book is that every 6 months we get an order of 9-volt batteries. It just shows up. And when that shows up, I know that it is time to go change all the batteries in the smoke detector.
Mm. Smart.
So that's one night waking up a baby, that was enough for me. I was like, that's never happened again.
It's like beep. It's like, oh man. So is your wife as productivity focused as you are, or you had to kind of like get her on the game?
Uh, in different ways. I think we complement each other very well. She's very, very organized, and she is really good at getting like if you put her on a task, she will take it to the nth degree and do it really, really, really well. She's a little bit more polished in some of the things she does as me. I'm more of like the get it good and get it going and then get it good. She definitely likes to put more polish on things, but uh, in some ways, and she's a little bit less into technology, a lot less into technology than I am, and actually that resistance is really helpful sometimes because
Mm.
it helps me refine the systems in a way that they should work for everybody.
Right. What I'm also hearing is clarity. Like when you walk into a business and you're coaching, a lot of times people like the owners or the founders don't know exactly what everybody's doing in order to be able to optimize the operation. Do you have to sit there and you as the coach come in and say, like, okay, what's everybody doing? How is this happening? What are all the strings that are being pulled so that we can optimize that? And when the owner sees that graph chart paper, is there shock as to what's actually going on?
Yeah, so that it is important a lot of times for me to sort of get that baseline understanding of what's going on. And so I have a process called the ultimate KPI, where basically each person fills out this form and they talk about the 20 things that they do on a regular basis. And then we look at that list and we say, all right, now you have to pick 16 of those things that one way or another you will never do again
Mm.
in a year's time. It's an 80/20 thing, right? So we end up with the four things that they are really either they really love doing or they really cannot possibly see a way of handing that off, which is significant, right? Because then what we're do is now we're like, all right, so now we're going to track everybody's journey towards replaceability. And what you see is, especially if you have a company with a hierarchy, right? So the 16 things that come off the person's list up here, eight of them go to this person down here and eight to this person, right? While at the same time they're offloading stuff on their plates going down, down. So the idea is that we want to make everybody more replaceable so we can replace them up, not out, which elevates the entire organization. So it is usually, yes, very eye-opening. And the other thing that you also will often see is that you have like I had a company that I just did this with recently, and there were 16 people in this group in the whole team, and uh, four of them had like a 40% overlap between the four
Mm.
of them of what they were doing. So all of them were, so it was the funniest thing because it was a Zoom call, and this person's like, yeah, so I do this, 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 and this, and the second person was like, I do this, 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 and this, and of the things they said, there were like four of them that were the same as the last person. I was like, okay, that could happen. And then the third person had the same thing. I was like, so like how why and it wasn't like a sales manager or something like that. It was like somebody responsible, like multiple people were responsible for like social media or something like that. It's
Uh,
like there's so who's doing what, which process are you following, like why are there three people doing this? And so that was definitely very eye-opening for that team. So because a lot of times we just don't look, right? People
uh,
don't take the time to shine the light and really understand how they're spending their time and what they're doing.
uh, love it. And then I wrote down here as you were speaking, why would people, what stops people from being productive?
Psychology most of the time. It's like the space between their ears. So procrastination, let's talk about procrastination first. The people that procrastinate, a lot of times procrastination, there's two main reasons why people procrastinate. One is because they don't know how to do the thing, which is not that often. Usually they're, or they think they don't know. And then the other one is this sort of like emotional fear-based response where they can't work on something unless there's urgency,
Mm.
right? Which most people are like in some form or fashion. And that's one of the reasons too why it's like something that takes somebody an hour and a half to do normally. If you tell them, look, you got 45 minutes, they're probably going to get it done. It's probably going to be almost as good. So work expands to fill the time allotted to complete it. So a lot of the idea, a lot of the productivity sort of challenges are very much like self-induced psychology issues. It's rarer and rarer that it's about knowing a real system. However, with what I do with a lot of clients, when I do show them like this is a way that you can manage this is the way you can communicate this, that is sometimes enough to like crack the seal that then they can run with that.
So they got to take care of, like you said, what's in your mind as to what's stopping you. Um, and my question to you is also, is there ever a moment where you like so much productivity, so much organization, so much automation, that free time for you, is it like to go do whatever you want to do? Or are there moments where you say like, I just don't want to be this productive. Like I just want to do whatever I want to do, but you're so productive that you have that freedom to do whatever you want to do.
So the productivity is the buzzword, honestly. It's
Yeah.
really more about being effective, right?
Mm,
So I guess it was, oh gosh, I think it's Peter Drucker, right? So productivity is producing more, efficiency is producing more with less, and effectiveness is producing the right things. And so
mm,
I'm always hyper focused on effectiveness. And sometimes being effective is doing something that on the surface of it looks extremely inefficient, right? A lot of things around family stuff are extremely inefficient, right? Sitting and hearing about somebody's fight with a friend at that during the day, it's really an inefficient way to use your time, right? But it's an extremely effective thing to do if you
mm.
want to have that peace in the home and if you want to grow and help that person grow. Um, Another thing is like, so as much outsourcing and stuff as I've done, I've had teams, I've had hundreds of VAs and stuff. We don't have a maid, we don't have a chef, we don't have a driver. All those things would make our lives so much easier. But then for what? Like then you become disconnected from the things that make us, human, right?
Mm.
So uh, it's definitely not the most effective for me to spend, an hour a day driving kids back and forth to school. Could totally outsource that and spend another hour working on my business or something. But even saying that out loud feels disgusting in
Yeah.
some ways, right?
It's like that
So
time, like you're actually creating that time to be able to spend with them, which to me, like you said, is irreplaceable.
yeah, and it's a really good guidepost, right? So it's like, how is this going to affect that? Uh, when people don't have a really good core sense of self, then you need some sort of a like a compass that helps you figure that out.
What's the first thing somebody listening to this should do as they're sitting there to be more efficient or effective, as we were talking about? You know, people talk about to-do lists or focus fours and all these types of things. What's the first thing that they should just sit down after listening to the last 20 some minutes of this and either write down or acknowledge or do?
Track everything you do today, for every hour during the workday. You don't have to, get up in the middle of the night for this, but just set a reminder on your phone every hour, write down 5 things that you did in the last hour, right? And I think everyone will be shocked at the end
Yeah,
of the day, and there's 2 ways that could go. One is somebody who gets to the end of the day, they're like, God, it was such a busy day. Like, I don't feel like I accomplished anything. And they look at their list and they've gotten 40 things done. Or the other one where it's like, gosh, I don't have any time. I don't have any time. And then they look at their list and it's like they spent, 30% of their day on email and social media. And it's like, wow,
yeah,
that was not what I thought I was doing with my time.
yeah. I was reading somebody recommended 10x is easier than 2x by Dan Sullivan.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is very in tune that when somebody becomes as efficient, effective, productive, whatever the words that we want to use, they become it's like they become something else to be able to create way more and do more and have that freedom to, as opposed to that freedom from. And I love that. I think that everybody listening should go follow you. Go to lessdoing.com. You've got courses, books, coaching, all that type of stuff. Because my belief is that for us to be able to live a great life, we have to do less at work, but not make less. When everyone thinks that we have to do more to make more.
Right. That's absolutely not the case.
Yeah.
You have to focus on the
Love it.
right things.
What was that?
Focus on the right things.
Yeah, love it. If I was to write down what I do every single hour, I'd probably be embarrassed. So I'm going to do that today. That's going to be my challenge for the next
Send
24
it to me.
hours.
Send it to me.
I sat there yesterday like, oh man, I didn't get much done today. And if I wrote it down, I'd be like, what am I doing? But Ari, I appreciate your time coming on the podcast, brother. Really, really, I feel that more people need to go check you out. Like I said, I've been following you for a bit. Either go buy your books. You've got the Replaceable Founder, The Art of Less Doing. Idea of so many books to learn from, as well as courses and just great, great information. So go to lessdoing.com. Any last words you want to say to the tribesmen who are listening?
Just ma- there's always an optimization to be had. And it's just a matter of looking at it and really accepting that you may be part of the problem.
Ah, love that. As I always tell everybody, Ari, may you be blessed with strength and courage. May your business grow. May your family be amazing with lots of health. And I appreciate your time and the value that you've added to the podcast.
Thank you.
Awesome. Stay tuned for the next episode of Tribesmen. We'll see you soon.